patriot blood of my fathers was warm in my veins, said Claire Barton, the founder of the American Red Cross. The American Red Cross is one of the leading organizations for helping people with health care, getting aid to wounded soldiers at war, and hundreds of other things. Here's my first topic: how the American Red Cross helps people. First off, they donate lots of money to vaccine developers. In 2019 alone, they donated $2,656,613,224 to developing vaccines. They have also helped get war prisoners free during World War II and the Vietnam War. They spend time with children of deployed families. Fun fact, during World War II, the American Red Cross shipped millions of care packages to war prisoners. My second topic I'm going to cover is how the American Red Cross was formed. The Red Cross was originally in Europe, so when Claire Barton visited there after the Civil War, she saw how they were providing health care. She got an idea. Why don't I bring this to the U.S.? So that's what she did. So the American Red Cross started by getting health care to wounded soldiers. And when they started doing that, they realized they're going to need a lot of blood for that. So they started the first ever blood program. Shortly after World War II started, the American Red Cross began getting volunteers ready. Fun fact, did you know that the American Red Cross has over 100 million volunteers? Volunteers for the American Red Cross don't just do aid. They also help write articles in Braille for the blind to read, teach CPR classes, and lots of other helpful stuff. The third topic I'm going to cover is how the difference between an American Red Cross volunteer and a worker. Volunteers do different jobs than the workers. For example, a volunteer might help get people to go to a blood drive, but the workers will be running the blood drive. And also, they get paid, obviously. My fourth topic I'm going to cover is what training the American Red Cross volunteers/workers have to go through to get approved, and how they recruit them. The American Red Cross has a website where you can sign up to become a volunteer or get an application to be a worker. Before I was born, our house caught fire. Nobody was harmed, but it was a bad situation for my parents. Eventually, when the workers came to rebuild our house, it wasn't just the workers that came, it was also the volunteers. So I'm not just talking about some random topic. The American Red Cross has a personal impact on my life. As I've said, the American Red Cross has been a helping hand for lots of things, from getting health care to wounded soldiers to helping the blind read. So what can you be a big help in?
In the 20th century was shown James Montgomery Flagg's World War I recruiting poster, also used in World War II, for which the caption read, "I want you." I'm sure you've heard of Uncle Sam before, but do you know how he represents America? Uncle Sam was a character encouraging people to volunteer. There have been many volunteer opportunities for people to volunteer, for men being drafted to war, Salvation Army, Red Cross, and other volunteering opportunities. Uncle Sam represents the volunteers and volunteer opportunities around America. Who is Uncle Sam actually? The origin of the term Uncle Sam, though disputed, is usually associated with a businessman from Troy, New York, Samuel Wilson, known affectionately as Uncle Sam Wilson. The nickname was to identify America. An agreement passed by Congress in 1961 to officially recognize Samuel Wilson as a symbol of America. His symbol was to help men be drafted to war. How did men being drafted to war represent volunteering? Men being drafted to war represented volunteering because they may have sacrificed their lives. Also, while men were going overseas, what were the women supposed to do? Women entered the workforce in droves as men were deployed to fight overseas. What they made were weapons, clothing, food, machines, and many other things in factories. Also, everything like science, medicine, and technology were advanced. The Red Cross and Salvation Army also helped the men and families that were deployed. Do you know what the Red Cross and Salvation Army actually do? The Red Cross helps teach people first aid, water safety, and life saving. Also, the Red Cross was founded in 1882. Salvation Army, on the other hand, was founded in 1865. They have weekly religious services, usually on Sundays. Services are informal and specified with singing and Bible reading. They also have weekday clubs for youth and prayer meetings. Do you know any other volunteer opportunities? I'm sure you've done some type of volunteer service, but there are many types of ways to volunteer. The three main types are person-to-person, person-to-group, and person-to-community. Person-to-person is carrying groceries or helping sorting books at a library. Person-to-group would be raking leaves at school, or singing at a nursing home. Lastly, a person in the community would be helping build a homeless shelter or helping a disaster relief agency. What have you done? Uncle Sam was created as a way to motivate people to volunteer. Joining the military by draft or volunteer, Red Cross, Salvation Army, and more opportunities are just some examples of how people volunteer their time and efforts. I hope you take this information and use it. Try some fundraising or donating. Do something that benefits the people in the area around you.
Did you know that Americans actually fired the first shot against Japan? That was the first time a Japanese submarine had been spotted near the entrance of the harbor. Pearl Harbor has so much history behind it and so much sacrifice. Thousands of men and women died during the attack, and every single one of them was a crucial part of the attack. There are so many reasons why Pearl Harbor was memorialized, but these are just some of them. Pearl Harbor was one of the most important days in U.S. history. Japan planned a surprise attack against the U.S. Navy. The Japanese chose to attack us because they wanted to expand into the Pacific. The attack began at 7:55 a.m. Japan brought 353 aircrafts, 5 submarines, and 8 battleships to try and defeat the U.S. During the attack, they sunk the USS Arizona, the USS Utah, and the USS Oklahoma. After the entire attack was over, the Japanese crippled or destroyed nearly 20 American ships and more than 300 airplanes. Every single person that was fighting that day sacrificed everything for their country. All the men knew what they were giving up when they were drafted, and they still did it anyway. On the attack of Pearl Harbor, 2,335 military personnel were killed and 1,178 were injured. Every soldier had family to make it back to, but only some of them could make it. I have a story of a man named Paul Free. He was just 19 years old when he was drafted to Pearl Harbor and lost his life. His niece, Anita Free Hearing, came out to the public and said, "If there's anyone I'd love to sit down and talk to, it's him. He's a hero." Anita said that because Paul sacrificed everything for his country, and with sacrifice comes bravery. Bravery makes the soldiers who they are. Samuel Farquhar was one of many important soldiers. After Japan dropped the first bomb on the ship, Farquhar rushed down to the quarterdeck immediately. Another bomb was dropped, and Farquhar went down. He got back up, though dazed, and helped the remaining survivors off the ship just minutes after a third bomb blew up the ship's ammunition. Samuel Farquhar was one of the last men to abandon ship. Because of his acts of bravery and heroism, Farquhar was awarded the Medal of Honor. Men weren't the only important ones, women were also important. Even though women were able to fight in the war, they were still working on the field as nurses, mechanics, telegraphers, and drivers. Very few of the women expected to have war, and most of them weren't ready. About 3 hours after the first bombing, a bunch of soldiers started rushing up to the shorelines for immediate care. The nurses stayed up day and night working with little sleep. A little while after the attack, a Women's Army Auxiliary Corps was created so women could go fight over shores. The reason that women were able to fight overseas is a big reason Pearl Harbor was memorialized. The day after the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 8th, President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared war on Japan. Japan at that time was an ally of Nazi Germany, so America was pulled into World War II. Before the bombing, the United States was very reluctant on joining the war. The most devastating wreck was the USS Arizona. More than 1,100 men died on the ship, and it was never raised out of the water after it sank. Now, a white concrete and steel structure stands where the USS Arizona sank. Because of the loss our country went through on December 7, 1941, President Roosevelt named it the day that would live in infamy. The one thing that Pearl Harbor showed us was that the United States could get through anything that comes our way. To wrap everything up, Pearl Harbor was full of loss and sorrow. The Japanese killed and injured thousands of people and destroyed families. It made the U.S. go to war with Japan, and it dragged us into World War II. Pearl Harbor is a solemn reminder that our country will always be under the threat of attack.
Once said, Americans are patriotic during the war and more united than ever before. The World War II Memorial displays how citizens sacrificed their lives, either literally in the war or figuratively in work for their country. Citizens stood together to show unity in the face of tolls of war. They put everything they had to help and support their country. What would you do to help you? The World War II Memorial does not only recognize the loss of the war, but also the victories. It is located on the site in Washington, D.C., opposite the Lincoln Memorial. In an oval shape in the memorial, there are 56 granite pillars, each 17 feet in height. According to Britannica, the pillars are linked with a bronze sculpted rope symbolizing the country's unified effort during the war. Additionally, on the west end of the memorial, there is a freedom wall that holds 4,000 stars, each representing 100 lives lost in the war. Along with the amazing architecture, there are many different forms of memorabilia, such as how it displays bronze columns holding bald eagles, victory medals, baldachins, and inscriptions of victories during the war. Furthermore, the memorial was designed by Frederick St. Florian and approved by President Bill Clinton in 1993. Over the years of 2001 to 2004, it was built, and finally, on April 29, 2004, the memorial was opened to the public. The World War II Memorial exhibits many things like honor to those who died, how Americans served their country, and appreciation to the victory that ended tyranny around the globe. World War II spurred enormous changes in family life with Sarah and Gail in context, and that it did. Approximately 50 million men fought in the war. This was a time with more traditional gender roles, so the women would be the conventional wives and the men would volunteer for war. Even with men volunteering, there were not enough soldiers, so there was a mandate draft. All men ages 21 to 45 were required to sign up for this draft, and around 10 million of them were drafted into the war. These draftees were picked from a pool of men and tested on by draft boards. If they were deemed fit by the draft boards, they were then admitted into the military. Along with being thrust into new conditions, these men had to put their home lives on hold. The couples had to wait to get married or to have kids, and 16 million men were separated from their families in this way. These fathers had to leave their kids, and the husbands had to leave their spouses. Unfortunately, sometimes these men would die, and they would never return home to their families. 1 in 5 families lost relatives to the war, and sadly, 416,800 soldiers died in the war. Even with men becoming soldiers, women were helping out too. 19 million women started working in support of the war. 5 million of them had never worked before. Many of these women were mothers trying to support their families at home. Because of the gender roles, these women were subjected to harsh environments, but they persevered to help their families survive and help the men in war. Ultimately, when they came home victorious, they were pushed out of the workforce. Though during the war, these women had proven that they were cut out for work too, whether they liked it or not. These women had started redefining gender roles that makes it the America today. And I'm grateful because of them, I have an opportunity to get an education and what I want to do in life, along with all other women in the country. Along with the losses, there was also sacrifices by the general public. It was a shock to them as when they had to ration, because they had never had to do that before. People's favorite items and many different commodities were put on ration, which allowed them not to get them or not enough. To help compensate for the lack of materials, people would create their own or have gardens to help with food and cook without things like meat to keep it so that the men could get at the war. There are many different forms of rationing, but some examples include how in 1941 there was a ration on tires and other Rubbermaid items, and how in 1943 there was a strict ration on oil, cheese, fat products, dairy, and forms of meat. And eventually shoes were rationed too. War had many losses, but it also faced many challenges during. It was a mental low point, and children were no excuse. These children don't remember fathers who were sent abroad for the war, and they were raised by neighbors or grandparents while their mothers were working to support the family. These families were changed forever by the war. I personally have had many of my great-grandparents and relatives fight in the war, and it gives me a newfound appreciation for what they had to go through at the time to help support their country and their families. I feel honored to be related to them, and I hope if you have relatives, you do too. And in conclusion, the World War II Memorial represents sacrifice and unity across the country, with the men going abroad to fight and the women staying home to work. Many lives are uprooted and changed forever by the changes that are required to survive. They did everything they could to survive and to help their country when If you were in their situation, what would you do?
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was an honorable man. He fought for equality and justice for everyone. Harry E. Johnson stated, "The first to honor an African American and an individual who did not serve as U.S. President. It would represent a milestone for all Americans. It is our goal that generations to come will visit the site and be inspired by the message that one man can have a profound influence on the life of people and a nation." In this speech, I'll be sharing about how this memorial was an important landmark for America. I will be talking about the importance of the structure. Looking back on his life, he was a determined man. He had a dream to see this world not as it should be, but what it could be. The Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial was a well-thought-out process. 900 plus designs were submitted. Students, landscapers, architects, and sculptors from 52 different countries all registered for the competition. There was a lot of designs to choose from, but only one could win. And that was a group called Roma Designs, an agriculture group from San Francisco. Keith C. Jones, Russell Simmons, Tommy Hilfiger, and others raised money to build the memorial dedicated to Martin Luther King Jr. The $100 million project had drawn more than 70 financial supporters. Walt Disney alone donated $2.4 million. The Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Monument was built between 2009 and 2011 in Washington, D.C. The memorial is located along the west bank of the tidal basin near the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Memorial, which is not far from Lincoln Memorial, where King delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. The memorial honors the American Baptist minister and social activist Martin Luther King Jr. He believed that everyone should have equal rights. He fought for the African Americans' rights until his assassination in 1968. The landmark is a well-deserved memorial fit for a king. The words, "Out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope," taken from the "I Have a Dream" speech. Those words are inscribed on one side of the memorial stone. The words, "I was a drum major for justice, peace, and righteousness" were originally inscribed on the other side of the stone. These quotes show he believed in something, that his dream will always be alive even if he isn't with us to this day. Some critics of the King Memorial claim that because he was not president, he does not deserve such an honor, but that shouldn't be tolerated. The National Memorial of Martin Luther King Jr. honors the man's life, words, courage, and legacy. He showed people how to change laws in peaceful ways instead of fighting. The memorial is dedicated to an amazing and honorable man. He didn't give up on people. He didn't want to. Instead, he gave them hope. Looking down at the broken ground for a 100 million 30-foot statue dedicated to Martin Luther King, thousands of people gathered to witness this historic event. It was so easy to get lost in a dream that was so strong, so right, it continues to bring people together. He had a dream to bring people together no matter the race or religion. All he wanted was equal rights for everyone. President Bush told a crowd of about 5,000 people that "I'm proud to dedicate this piece of our nation's capital to the lasting memory of a great man." A great man, he states. Martin Luther King Jr. was a man who marched for equality, a man who died believing in a dream, a man who had hope that someday we could all see each other as equals. Martin Luther King Jr. was an honorable man with a hopeful mind. He had a dream for the world to see everyone as an equal. He didn't want there to be a line of division between the color of your skin. He wanted the chance to show everyone that his dream was possible. His dream wanted to break down barriers. He had the qualities of truth, courage, and hopefulness. He believed in something reachable. Martin Luther King Jr. had a goal to have people not judge you for the color of your skin when they first look at you. For the future generations of African Americans to not feel attacked because of the pigment of their skin. His "I Have a Dream" speech pulled Americans in to hear him, to see him, and to believe with him. His dream was fighting for something remarkable. That memorial of Martin Luther King Jr. in Washington, D.C. isn't just a man with a silly dream. Martin Luther King Jr. wanted his dream to be achieved, so why not achieve that dream? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Whatever you are, be a good one. Abraham Lincoln. With a show of hands, how many people have been to the Lincoln Memorial? Okay, we have a few. I believe that the Lincoln Memorial represents America because even when we were at our worst, we made it through and prevailed. It is an important landmark because it shows where we came from and is a huge part of our history. I will also talk about how it represents America as a whole. Lincoln was assassinated and died on April 15, 1865. He was the first president to be successfully assassinated, although there was multiple attempts with multiple different presidents. The Lincoln Memorial is in Washington, D.C. It is kind of near the reflection pool. Work started in 1914 and was completed in 1922, although there was a slow and eventually a halt to the construction because we had entered a war. He was the 16th president. During his presidency, the nation split, just based on slavery views. Henry Bacon was the sculptor. During the war, it had changed multiple times, but it ended up just being Henry Bacon. The 48 connected states are engraved above the colonnade. Hawaii and Alaska are not included in this because they were not a part of America at the time. But there is a plaque with their names on it on the front steps. Every race, ethnicity, and religion should be included in their rights. Muslims should not be seen as terrorists. African Americans should not be seen as gang members, and Latinx should not be seen as illegal. Lincoln has helped us see that every human, no matter the color of their skin, they deserve equal rights. The importance of the memorial is just beyond celebrating Lincoln's life. It's so much more than that. It's about the racial injustice that we have battled and are continuing to battle now. Life is about so much more than just the color of your skin or your political views. And I'm tired of people thinking that's what life is about. It's not. It's about learning to love and appreciate the people around you. Now, I challenge you. Go out into the world and look beyond someone's political views, religion, or the color of their skin. Look at their heart, because that's where you find the most pure part of humans. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. James Baldwin, thank you for listening.
Well, I'm sure most of you don't know much about the Dose Tower, but to be honest, neither did I. So that's what I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Started with an 87-year-old man called Robert Killen. He was the oldest person to ever climb the 5,112-foot tall Dose Tower. That was impressive and all, but from the right angle, you can see it up to 100 feet away. Fun fact, in the month of November through December, you can see up to 18,000 birds of different species migrating in the view of Pennsylvania. If you didn't know, tribes lived around there, and they told us a story where a boy was chasing a girl, and the boy turned into a giant bear. And the ground rose the girl to safety, but the bear started clawing at the ground. That's why there's columns on the side. But it's just a story, and of course none of that is true. The Dose Tower was actually made through thousands of years of erosion of wildlife, water, and wind just tearing at the dirt. And who knows, maybe far into the future, it'll be double the size it is now. Back to the tribes. Rock climbers would come to this Dose Tower to climb, of course. Well, the tribes felt like they were being denied of their religion, and that caused a dispute between the two. Eventually, they came to a compromise, and the rock climbers couldn't climb in the month of June. Well, they didn't like that, but the tribes decided not to make it a rule, and that was more of a respect thing. So, since then, 85% of rock climbers stopped climbing in the month of June. And now, 6,000 rock climbers would come each year, so that means only 5,100 rock climbers continue to climb in the month of June. There are multiple tribes that live around there, not just one, and they would perform rituals and dances and stuff like that, but it was also a place for offerings, prayers, and also ceremonies. But that's not all. There's also places you can visit, like the Wind Circle Monument, and there's also trails you can take, like the Red Beds Trail, the View Trail, the Joint Ridge Trail, and Southside Trail. But the Dose Tower is also known for being in the TV show Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That's cool and all, but Like, there's more places you can visit, like the Trading Post, Rogers Gallery, and Highlight Museum. That's all.
Alrighty. How Mount Rushmore represents America. Mount Rushmore represents America by being a symbol of freedom and hope. Mount Rushmore is a symbol of freedom and hope for people from all cultures and backgrounds. All the cultures that make up the history of America are represented by the memorial and the surrounding Black Hills. With George Washington being the first president, he represents the birth of America. Thomas Jefferson, who nearly doubled the country's size with the Louisiana Purchase and stood for its westward expansion. Theodore Roosevelt, who had overseen the construction of the Panama Canal, he was a symbol of economic growth, and Abraham Lincoln was selected for having fought to preserve the nation in the Civil War. How they built Mount Rushmore and what they used to build it. According to NationalGeographic.com, it took 400 men, many of them miners working with sculptor Gutzon Borglum, to chisel the faces of 4 U.S. presidents on Mount Rushmore, using a combination of dynamite, jackhammers, and fine carving tools. In 1936, a powder monkey worker held dynamite and detonators that would be used to blast rock at Mount Rushmore, clearing away some of the granite before some of the more precise carvers swooped in. A massive 90% of Mount Rushmore was blown up by dynamite. Fun fact, Thomas Jefferson's face began on the right side of George Washington, but Borglum blew that up and carved a new head on the left. How big Mount Rushmore is. Each president's head stretches as tall as Egypt's Great Sphinx. Each eye measures 11 feet across, or as big as a recreational kayak. The nose of the presidents are about 20 feet. Mouths at 18 feet wide, the mouths are bigger than a Range Rover. Actual Mount Rushmore is 2 square miles. The mountain itself, at an elevation of 5,725 feet, was named in 1885 for Charles E. Rushmore, a New York lawyer. The memorial, which covers 2 square miles, was designated in 1925 and dedicated in 1927. The controversy of Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore was built on sacred Native American land and sculpted by a man with ties to the KKK. Mount Rushmore National Memorial was fraught with controversy even before it was completed 79 years ago, October 31st, 1941. The civil rights movement of the 1960s inspired a wave of protests among Native Americans across the country. In the summer of 1970, protests came to Mount Rushmore when a few dozen activists from the organization United Native Americans scaled the memorial to demand the return of Black Hills to Lakota. They camped atop the memorial for months and then returned the following summer for a briefer protest that ended in their arrest. In 1980, the long-running legal dispute finally reached the U.S. Supreme Court in the landmark United States v. Sioux Nation of Indians case. The Supreme Court ruled that the U.S. government had improperly taken the Black Hills Territory from the Lakota, who were deemed entitled to $17.1 million in damages, but declined the compensation and have since advocated for the return of the Black Hills instead. Mount Rushmore remains a protest site today. Activists and members of different Native American tribes blocked the road to Mount Rushmore National Monument in South Dakota on July 4th, 2020. They were protesting the visit of the U.S. President Donald Trump and the fact that the monument was built on sacred indigenous land. That is how Mount Rushmore represents America, by being a symbol of freedom and hope for people from all cultures and backgrounds. All the cultures that make up the fabric of America are represented by the memorial and the surrounding Black Hills. George Washington representing the birth of America, Thomas Jefferson, who nearly doubled the size of America, Theodore Roosevelt, who was a symbol of economic growth, and Abraham Lincoln, who was selected for having fought to preserve the nation in the Civil War.
When you think of an American landmark, what do you think of? Perhaps the White House, the Statue of Liberty, Mount Rushmore? All of these places are American landmarks, perhaps one that means something special to you. Each and every one of us has a landmark that has touched us in some way. People from all over the world come to America to see these unique and interesting places. To me, a true American landmark not only shows the growth and history of a place and where we are now, but it also shows the real truth. And the Golden Gate Bridge is the perfect example of that. The bridge started in January of 1933 and was completed on May 27th of 1937. It is located in San Francisco, California, and is used to connect that city with the Marin County. This played an important role in the merchandising and trading business at that time period. People from all over wanted to come to California to see and travel across this magnificent bridge. At the time, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world, ranging from 4,200 feet long and 265 feet above the water. So this also boosted the population of California from people coming to see it, and also the economy to where we are now. During the 30s, the whole world was going through something that would forever be a part of history. This event was the Great Depression. It was the longest and most severe depression ever experienced by the industrialized Western world. Many people lost their jobs during this time. Families were left poor, hungry, homeless. So you may be wondering, how does this tie in with the Golden Gate Bridge? Well, the bridge was going to be a lot of work, and they needed many people to not only build it, but to plan it out. The bridge gave jobs to many people, the ones who needed it the most. Workers on the bridge came from many different backgrounds. So this too played an important role into the American economy, because it gave those people jobs and resources. Another reason why the Golden Gate Bridge is a true American landmark is what the people had to go through, the workers on the bridge. Every day they would put their lives on the line to build this bridge. The strait had rapidly running tides, frequent storms, and fogs that made construction very difficult. But the weather wasn't the only difficulty. The safety net failed on February 17th. Of the 13 men who were on the scaffolding, 1 jumped clear, 2 survived the fall into the water, and 11 were killed. These people not only faced the death of their fellow co-workers, but also their friends, their family. So even with these hard trials, they continue to work hard in honor of those people to complete this bridge. I believe that a true landmark shows the raw history, the experiences, the blood, the sweat, and the tears of either accomplishing something or a moment in history that was so tragic you can feel and see the emotion put forward into it. I was able to visit the Golden Gate Bridge many years ago, and from the first time I saw it, I was in awe. But the bridge isn't the only thing I saw. Not only underneath the bridge, but farther beside it were jail cells. And though I'm not going to tell you what they're for in this speech, I want you to imagine how it could have affected the building of the bridge, California, and all of America during that time. A true landmark doesn't show people what they want to see, but it shows the real truth. And the Golden Gate Bridge is the perfect example of that. I'm going to end this speech today with a quote. The bridge was once called the bridge that couldn't be built, but today it's a world-famous landmark and an enduring engineering marvel. Thank you.
Today I will be talking about the American flag, Flag Day, our founding fathers, and what the symbol of the American flag means to me. The American flag, as everybody knows, has the 13 original stripes, which means our 13 original colonies that we first had when we escaped Britain. After we escaped Britain, our founding fathers, or George Washington, thought of a flag that we needed to show that we are our own nation now. So we thought of the Betsy Ross flag. The Betsy Ross flag has the 13 original stripes with 13 stars shaped in a circle. Betsy Ross was the first original person to sew the American flag, and that is why she is a very important person in our nation. The stars represent all the colonies and all the states that we have in our nation. Our nation has 15 different states, and that's why there's 50 stars on there. Flag Day is a very beautiful day to me because it represents all the veterans and our president that we have. Flag Day is now known as Veterans Day because we have President's Day. We split Flag Day into two, and we made it where veterans and the president were celebrated on different days. Veterans Day falls on a Monday on June 14th this summer. Our founding fathers had to take a lot of time to think about the American flag, and they thought of our pledge, which is a very great thing for us because we pledge to our flag and to our nation. Our founding fathers took a long time to think about our design and what we all needed on there. We need to represent all our nations and all of our original colonies. So they represented the 50 nations by the 50 stars and the 13 original colonies by the stripes. The red on the flag represents the blood of our soldiers.
The white represents the peace and harmony that we have in our nation, and the blue represents the justice that our veterans and our president has for us. My thoughts and feelings on the flag is that it saddens me that we don't say the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning anymore because of the force of religion. I get why we don't do that. It just saddens me to a point where when I think about it, I want to cry about it. When I grow up, I want to help defend my country like my oldest brother does, like my great-grandpa does, and how my dad did. When I grow up, I want to be in the Air Force and protect my colony and my flag. Thank you.
When you think of a landmark or symbol that represents America, you don't tend to think of a piece of paper. This piece of parchment was a big part of America becoming America. This is the document that started it all, the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence was drafted by a committee of 5 men who were selected by Congress. The names of these men were Roger Sherman, Robert Livingston, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and the main writer himself, Thomas Jefferson. All these men had political careers before becoming part of the committee. Some were even writers and scientists. John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson are also part of the Founding Fathers. The Declaration was drafted and then submitted for Congress. On July 4, 1776 is when the Declaration was adopted. The whole reason the parchment document was created was because of King George III's actions. He passed acts and taxed the colonies. On August 2, 1776 is when the 56 people came together to sign this document. That alone represents America. That represents America because many men and women came together to sign a document that meant freedom. They may have not all agreed with what was written, and they may have had different reasons on signing, but they signed it anyway. They signed it to create our government, to create the United States, and most of all, they signed it to create a better life and to have freedom. The Declaration opened doors with its 3 basic ideas. 1, God created all men equal and have the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. 2, the main business of the government is to protect these rights. And 3, the government, if they try to withhold these rights, the people are free to revolt and start a new government. This document still stands as the backbone of our nation. This is the document that also brought the divided colonies together. As I said, the Declaration of Independence was the document that started all, from the first ideas of freedom to the final signing day. The process of freedom, signing, and drafting the Declaration was long and hard. I think about what it would be like if we were still under King George III's rule. What would the world look like today? But those are just what ifs. We got our freedom. And you can be reminded of that when you visit the archives hall where the Declaration is held. The people can see it and be reminded about how many people fought and lost their lives for freedom for the 13 colonies and freedom for us today and the future.
John Kerry once said, "Remember the hours after September 11th when we came together as one. It was the worst day we've ever seen, but about the best in all of us. People, communities, towns, states, and the whole country came together to help each other. The 9/11 Memorial is a tribute of remembrance. What happened on September 11th, 2001 changed people's lives forever. On September 11th, 2001, 2 planes with the World Trade Center, also known as the Twin Towers. Al-Qaeda sent over 19 terrorists to take over the planes. At 8:46 a.m., the first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, was piloted into the North Tower, leaving most people thinking it was an accident. The second plane, United Airlines Flight 175, hit the South Tower 17 minutes later. The United States realized they were under attack. People jumping out of the towers trying to save their lives. Fire departments, police officers all rushed into the scene, trying to save them. Nearly 3,000 firefighters, police officers, and law enforcement workers died doing a job they loved. Then at 9:37 a.m., the hijackers flew the plane into the western side of the Pentagon. Right when the plane hit the Pentagon, it bursted into flames, with 7 crew members, 33 passengers, and 4 hijackers all dying. The last plane that was hijacked crashed into a field in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. Crashed here because the crew and passengers trying to regain control again, leaving everyone getting killed. Over 3,000 people ended up dying on 9/11. Countries came together to help the United States, changing people's lives forever. Back then, there wasn't much security in airports. After that, the country stepped up their security levels. Now we go through TSA and they check our bags. Airports were closed a couple days after the 11th. When those days were over, everyone was scared to get back on a plane. Lots of people started to go to church, spending time with family, and everyone started hanging the American flag. In April 2003, the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation established a competition to design the memorial at the World Trade Center site. 5,201 people entered the design. In January of 2004, the design won by architect Michael Arad and landscape architect Peter Walker. The design features twin waterfall pools surrounded by bronze pamphlets that list the names of the victims who died. Both of the pools were around an acre in size and were surrounded by 400 swamp white oak trees. Each waterfall sits right where the towers were. The North Pool had the names of the people who died in the North Tower, Pentagon, and in Pennsylvania. The South Pool had the names of the people who died in the South Towers and the first responders. The pools are the largest man-made waterfall in North America. The memorial opened on September 11, 2011, 10 years later. What happened on September 11, 2001 changed people's lives forever. The event of that day, how it changed people's lives after that, and even the people who were not born in 2001 were still impacted on it. The 9/11 Memorial was constructed and remember and honor those who died on 9/11. Remember all the people who fight for your country, work in your town, and help you out. Make sure to thank those people who keep you safe on a daily basis.
You know that bird you see flying across the sky? That bird's the bald eagle. And that majestic force of nature is always there to help pull Americans together in hard times. So let's start from the beginning. After the Declaration of Independence was signed, a committee was formed with Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams at the forefront. After many years of debate, the three came up with their first design, which included the 13 shields of the colonies and the words E pluribus unum, which in Latin means out of many becomes one. After many more designs, as well as other committees where, fun fact, they added an olive branch, as well as a quiver of arrows. In 1782, Charles Thompson created our great national seal. The seal started with the 13 shields of the colonies, with a bald eagle in the middle. In each of her talons, she had an olive branch in her right and a quiver of war arrows, representing the America's power, and a quiver of war arrows in the left. In the eagle's mouth, across a glorious banner, read the words E pluribus unum, and finally, across the eagle's chest, there was a shield with 13 alternating red and white stripes with a blue top. And on June 20th, 1782, this great seal was approved, and the bald eagle became our national bird. Did you know that the seal that I just finished talking about took over 6 years to make? And also, Ben Franklin, during that process, didn't want the bald eagle to become our national bird. He thought the turkey was more fitting because he thought it was more wild and patriotic. I don't know what he was thinking, but I like the bald eagle personally better. Over the many other years after the bald eagle became our national bird, many stories around famous bald eagles came around, but this is personally my favorite of the bunch. During the Civil War, the 8th Wisconsin Voluntary found an abandoned pet bald eagle that they made their mascot. That bald eagle was named Old Abe, and after they met, Old Abe came charging into every single of the 8th Wisconsin Voluntary's next couple of battles, leading them to some key victories. After those few battles, the Confederate soldiers saw how much hope and a morale boost Old Abe gave to the soldiers. So, they plotted an assassination plan to kill Old Abe. Thankfully, they failed. 42 battles later, Old Abe and the 8th Wisconsin Voluntary made their way home as heroes. After the war, Old Abe was given to the state, and he did many things, including a tour which, fun fact, helped raise money for returning veterans, as well as many meet and greets since he lived at the Capitol building. Sadly, in 1881, Old Abe, after his many meet and greets, as well as many years of enjoying life after war as a veteran, Old Abe passed away. Fun fact about Old Abe and his 42 battles, he won most of them, surprisingly, being a bald eagle and everything, but he still won most of his battles and survived all of them, obviously. And the worst of his battles, fun fact, being Vicksburg, Mississippi. After all I've told you about the story of Old Abe, as well as the story of how the bald eagle became our national bird, I hope you now agree that the bald eagle is one of those powerful and patriotic symbols of America. Thank you.